Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to take complex source material, really break it down so you can get the essential insights fast. Today, we're tackling a really important, sometimes challenging topic from medical surgical nursing, the complete assessment of the reproductive system.
Exactly. And our goal here is to give you a clear path through what can feel like a very dense chapter. We're hitting the core knowledge, the steps nurses need to take. And importantly, remembering these issues, they hit on two levels, right? Physical health, sure, but also the really personal psychosocial side of sexuality.
That dual impact, yeah, that seems central. The source material points out, even before the physical stuff, there are these key concepts driving the care.
That's right, the two big priorities for clinical action, infection and pain. But the concept that kind of underpins everything, how we interact, is sexuality. And often, as nurses, we're the first ones hearing about these problems. So sensitivity, being non-judgmental, respecting gender identity, sexual orientation, it's non-negotiable.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Maybe start with the physical basics,
Yeah.
like a quick tour of the anatomy and function, but focusing on what's clinically relevant. For the female system, externally, you've got the vulva, structures like the labia majora protecting things, and then the labia minora Bartholin glands. Those are key for lubrication, right?
Exactly. Protection and function. Then internally, vagina, uterus, ovaries, the clinical focus shifts a bit. What's really interesting is the vagina's own defense system. It keeps an acidic pH, usually between 3.5 and 5.0, thanks to normal flora. That acidity is a major barrier against infections. And, remembering women are born with all the oocytes they'll ever have. That's fundamental for understanding fertility, menopause, the whole aging process.
Gotcha. And flipping to the male system, key structures externally are the penis and scrotum. Hormone-wise, it's testosterone. And what's interesting is how stable it stays, relatively speaking, until maybe the 80s. Just a slow, gradual decline.
Right.
And the scrotum's main job is temperature control for the testes, keeping them just slightly cooler, essential for sperm production.
Yeah, and speaking of the testes, they make the sperm and testosterone. But clinically, here's a big one. Damage or infection there. It triggers autonomic nerves, causing just excruciating pain, often with severe nausea. That referred pain pattern is a critical assessment cue. Internally, you've got the prostate gland making alkaline fluid for sperm. And, BPH, benign prostatic hyperplasia, is so common in men over 50, prostate health is always on the radar.
Okay, so aging brings changes to both systems. That's expected.
Yeah, but the key nursing role, the source emphasizes, is teaching patients what's a normal change versus what's an abnormality they need to report, Differentiating those is huge.
Absolutely. So physical foundation's covered. Now, the patient's history, this part can be tough, right? It's sensitive information.
Incredibly sensitive. It all comes down to trust. Being completely non-judgmental, showing respect, especially for our LGBTQ patients, and crucially explaining why you're asking these very personal questions. It's not just curiosity. It's essential data for their care plan.
And we need to be detectives, connecting other health issues to reproductive function, like the book mentions metabolic issues, severe nutritional problems.
Right, like anorexia. It can suppress ovarian function, leading to amenorrhea, no periods. And think bigger picture. Diabetes, linked to vaginal dryness or impotence. Chronic heart, lung, nerve conditions, they can totally change sexual response. Past infections are huge clues too. PID, pelvic inflammatory disease, or even scarring from something like a ruptured appendix can cause blockages. Or salpingitis, that's fallopian tube infection, often from chlamydia, big cause of infertility.
Wow. And childhood illnesses can have echoes later, like mumps in boys.
Yes, absolutely. Mumps can lead to orchitis, which is this acute, painful inflammation of the testes. If that happens, it can cause the testes to shrink, to atrophy, and potentially cause sterility down the road.
Okay.
Same goes for things like undescended testicles if they weren't treated, or untreated STIs causing infertility in anyone.
And we need to ask about medications, exposures too, like radiation, steroids.
Definitely. Prior radiation, long-term corticosteroids, hormone therapy, especially MHT, risks over 60 chemo, all potential factors.
Okay, and what about nutrition and genetics?
Well, basic stuff first. Poor diet, fatigue that can lower libido, or sex drive, makes sense. But more seriously, the source links 70% of uterine cancers to obesity and inactivity. That's significant. And women actually need a certain amount of body fat for regular periods. Post-menopause, calcium needs go way up.
Right.
Genetically, BRCA1 and BRCA2 mutations for breast and ovarian cancer risk are critical history points. And for men, having a dad or brother with prostate cancer, that triples their risk. So family history really guides screening.
Okay, so that's the background. Now let's zero in on when a patient comes in with a problem. The source groups current issues into like 4 main symptom categories, the 4 key cues. Let's start with pain.
Yeah, pain is tricky here because it can feel like a GI problem or a urinary tract issue. So the assessment has to be really structured. What type of pain? How intense? When does it happen? Where is it? How long does it last? And crucially, how does it relate to their period, sex, urination, even bowel
I'm
movements?
asking about sleep disruption, too.
Oh, absolutely. Pain that wakes someone up, that often signals something more acute needing faster attention.
Okay, cue number 2, bleeding. If a sexually active woman misses her period, amenorrhea, you got to think pregnancy first, right?
And a practice, yep.
But the absolute priority, the book hammers this home, postmenopausal bleeding. That is never normal.
Yeah.
It demands immediate evaluation, could be endometrial or cervical cancer.
Exactly.
And for anyone, male or female, you need the details. Amount, characteristics, is it tied to trauma, exercise, sex?
Okay, third cue, discharge. This points right back to that priority concept, infection. Discharge usually comes with irritation, itching, pain, causes a lot of anxiety. So you assess amount, color, consistency, any odor, and is it new or ongoing? And lifestyle factors are interesting here, asking about new meds like antibiotics, which mess with normal flora, or even clothing-tight synthetic stuff.
Read practical things. Okay, final cue, masses. This means checking breasts, tests, the groin area.
Yeah, and you need specifics. Location, is it tender? Does it feel heavy? Any skin changes like dimpling?
And you ask if it changes with their cycle.
Yeah.
Or showed up after lifting something heavy. Could point to a hernia or trauma.
Precisely. So those 4 cues, pain, bleeding, discharge masses, really guide that initial assessment of a current problem.
Okay, so history, symptoms. Now we move into diagnostic tests to confirm things. Let's focus on the ones with really critical nursing implications.
Let's start with cytology, the TAP test. Gold standard for detecting precancerous or cancerous cervical cells. And the pre-test teaching is non-negotiable for accuracy. You have got to tell the patient, no douching, no vaginal meds or powders, no intercourse for 24 hours before.
And the screening schedules are there for a reason. They save lives. U.S. guidelines generally start annual PAPs at 21, then maybe every 3 years from 2165 if results are normal. Canada's similar, maybe stopping a bit later at 70.
Right, guidelines vary slightly, but the principle is consistent screening.
And we also have the HPV test, right? Looking for those high-risk virus types linked to cervical cancer.
Yep, but it supplements the PAP, doesn't replace it, it adds information.
Gotcha. And for men, the PSA test for prostate cancer screening or monitoring.
Yeah, and here's a really vital point on health equity. African American men, their risk is about 1.6 times higher for getting prostate cancer and sadly double the death rate compared to white men. So the recommendation is often to start screening them earlier, like around age 40.
That's a critical point to remember. Okay, moving to imaging. Mammography, standard breast x-ray. What's the key teaching there?
The big one. Absolutely no creams, lotions, powders, or deodorant on the breasts or underarms beforehand.
Why is that?
Because the residue can show up on the x-ray looking like tiny calcifications, which are a potential sign of cancer, it can lead to a false positive or misdiagnosis.
Ah, okay. Makes sense. We also use ultrasonography, right, for internal viewing.
Great for looking at fibroids, cysts, checking for ectopic pregnancy or masses in females, and for males, prostate or testicular masses. But here's a major safety alert the text highlights. Internal ultrasounds, like transvaginal or transrectal, they use a latex-covered probe.
Oh, wow.
So you must check for a latex allergy before the procedure. Huge safety point.
Definitely huge. Okay, let's talk about 2 internal procedures that seem to cause specific issues. Hysterosalpingography and laparoscopy. Used for fertility checks, minor surgeries. The source mentions this common side effect, referred shoulder pain. That seems really specific. How does that happen?
Yeah, it's quite common and can be alarming if the patient isn't prepared. With laparoscopy, they use CO2 gas to inflate the abdomen for better viewing. With hysterosalpingography, it might be the contrast dye itself. Either way, that gas or dye can irritate the phrenic nerve.
Which runs up to the shoulder.
Exactly. So the brain interprets the irritation signal as coming from the shoulder. It usually goes away within 48 hours.
So the nursing role is teaching them to expect it, reassuring them it's not their heart or lungs.
Precisely. And also remembering the contraindications. Absolutely no-go if pregnant, if there's an active pelvic infection, or an iodine allergy for the hysterosalpingogram.
Got it. Okay, last category, biopsies. Lots of different types, but let's focus on the most common one for men, the transrectal prostate biopsy. This ties right back to that priority concept of infection, doesn't it?
Directly. Infection is a known risk, so giving prophylactic antibiotics beforehand is standard procedure. And the post-procedure teaching is all about safety and preventing sepsis.
What should patients expect and what needs immediate reporting?
Okay, so expect some minor things. Maybe light rectal bleeding for a few days, some blood in the urine for a few days, moderate amount is okay initially, and even discolored semen for several weeks. That's all expected.
But the warnings are,
The critical things to report immediately are fever, bleeding that's heavy or doesn't stop, pain getting worse instead of better, or any new pain or difficulty urinating. Those could be signs of infection or other complications. Sepsis is a real risk.
okay, that's incredibly important post-procedure care. So let's wrap this up. We've gone through anatomy, risks, symptoms, diagnostics. What's the big picture here for the learner?
Well, I think it really shows that assessing the reproductive system is it's complex. It's way more than just a physical check. It demands really thorough, really sensitive history taking. And that patient teaching, especially around managing pain and preventing infection, are two big priorities, is just essential.
Yeah. So quick takeaways for you listening. One, that psychosocial piece, sexuality, influences everything. Non-judgmental care is absolutely key. Two, sticking to those Pap and mammogram screening guidelines. That literally saves lives. Know the schedules, know the risk factors that change them. And three, being super vigilant after procedures. Watching for infection fever, worsening pain, weird discharge, especially after things like the hysterosalpingogram or that prostate biopsy. That's critical nursing.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. We talked about all these chronic illnesses, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and lifestyle factors impacting reproductive health. So how might our whole approach change if we started thinking less about just the primary reproductive symptom and more about the patient's total systemic health as maybe the real root cause driving the issue?
That's a great question to chew on. Really shifts the perspective. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this breakdown helps you nail down this crucial chapter.